Hey everyone, this is Rosemarie from the Unfinished Lesson, and this is another Quick Win series. In this particular series, we've been taking a look at teaching how to practice. If you have missed the other videos in this series, by all means, check the description below. I highly recommend pause and go back and watch those. We have covered a lot. We've covered why we should practice during lesson time. We've covered how to make it relevant. We've covered about making choices or giving choices. We've covered giving ownership for our student or to our students. By the way, I mixed up those last two. But we've covered a lot of different things. And so I want you to get the most out of these series. So please go back, watch those. There's very simple action tips that you can use in your studio this week that will take you very little time to implement, but will have a massive impact. All right, so let's get into video number 5, last video of this series. We're going to talk about how on earth do we make lesson time? There is so much to cover during lessons, right? It doesn't seem like there's ever enough time. And how on earth are we supposed to add making time to practice, right? Does it mean we're going to get through less songs? Does it mean we're not going to be able to do fun activities? It's a concern, and it's a valid concern. So let's talk about that. Well, lessons really should be about practice. We want to make sure that whatever's happening in lesson time and what's happening during the week, there isn't a disconnect between those. And I've talked in a previous video about what happens when we have that disconnect. I believe that was video 1. So what we want to do is, rather than having our students flounder during the week or even during lesson time, we want to coach them. Now, you may be rolling your eyes. We're not sports people. Maybe you are. I never was a sports person. So I'll admit, when I first heard we should be more like coaches versus, teachers, I kind of rolled my eyes too. But the truth is that the more that we can coach, the more that we can guide our students, the better off they are, the better a teacher we are. And to be honest, it's a lot less energy that we have to, or that I've had to expend when I'm a guide. And ironically, my students like it better. The parents are more impressed. Wow, this teacher really knows what she's talking about, because she's just like, and it's great. And so, yeah, there's lots of reasons why we want to be a coach or a guide. Use whichever term you want. But the idea that we have to have all the answers all the time, not necessarily. So what does this have to do with practice? Well, what we want to do during lesson time is give our students lots of opportunities to hear and see what we are hearing and seeing. There's lots of different ways to do this. So if you teach in person, maybe you do like a quick video and then you show it to the student so that they can see what you're seeing and hear what you're hearing. I used to, for students that would get really nervous on video, I would just do an audio recording. Now that I teach online, sometimes that can be a little more difficult because I'm already recording the lesson. But what I will do is I will play something the way that they played it, and then I will play it the way that it's written. Now, granted, this is an imperfect solution because obviously I'm going to probably have fixed other things other than that one thing I want them to listen to. But if, for example, they keep pausing in between measures, this is a pretty common one, right? Then and they say, no, I didn't do that at all. Okay, here, I'm going to play this for you 2 times, and I want you to tell me which one is the one that you should be aiming for. And then I play for them, and I make sure that there's the pauses in between the measures in one of them, and then that there isn't pauses in between the measures in the other one. I don't tell them which one it was. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I say, this is what I heard, and this is what's written. and then they can listen and hear the difference. But we want to give them lots of opportunities. And so whether that's a recording or whether that's you playing, training their ears to listen for certain things over a long period of time will help that skill develop. I would say that in terms of making lesson time, rather than worrying so much about covering a lot of different things, understand that if you don't practice during lesson time, there wasn't much point in doing all of those things because your students are going to flounder, they're going to struggle, and then they're just not, like, it's just not going to work out anyways. Do you know what I mean? So even though you covered 3 or 4 songs, they didn't really make great progress on them anyways. I would also say the third thing is just ask lots of questions. Instead of giving answers, ask questions, and encourage them to ask a lot of questions as well. So instead of saying, there was pauses in between the measures, ask them, okay, I know one of the things you were going to work on this week was, or your goal for playing through it this time was to not have pauses in between the measures of this section. Did you have pauses? Now, some students will say yes, they will have heard it, they were listening for it, and other students will say no. That's when you go to the other option of, this is what I heard, this is what's written. Do you hear the difference between those? So we're in the training process more so there than the student that goes, yeah, no, I had, pauses in between the measures. And encourage them to ask a lot of questions as well. My students know that if I say, okay, well, so what's the goal for this next playthrough? And they say, well, I need to fix this, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know, like, do you have any ideas on how that could help? Or I know that this needs to improve, but I can't hear what to fix next. That's totally cool. I encourage my students to let me know that because it gives me insight as to what is relevant for them in that moment and also where they need some extra help. And so by asking questions and encouraging questions back, it means that you're able to support your students in a way that is meaningful to them, right? It allows them to have ownership over their learning, but it makes it relevant within that moment as well. All right, so before you go on with the rest of your day, in the previous video, you probably put a Post-it note somewhere where you were teaching. And for this video, I would like you to grab another Post-it note. Same color, different color, it doesn't matter. But what I want you to do is put it somewhere that you're going to see it. And I want you to write on there, is there anything you need help so that you can be successful this week with this section or song? Now, that might be a little long to put on a Post-it note. If you want the shorter version, is there anything you need to be successful right now with this song? However you want to word it, just make sure it's at eye level. And then before you move on with a song, before you move on to the next thing in lesson, ask your student that. It's something that I started doing a while ago, and it was interesting. Sometimes I thought my student was ready to move on, but they weren't. They didn't feel like they were. And so they said, you know what? Yeah, I just need to run through this a few more times in lesson. And can you listen for this? Or can you check that I'm doing this? What maybe it's that I lift at the end of the phrase. Okay, not a problem. I can do that. And you know what? I would rather spend that time with my student that we go through that extra few repetitions and maybe we don't get to everything, but they feel super confident in what they're going to practice that week and that they can do this successfully, then we just moved on. And then all of a sudden, maybe they didn't feel confident and they didn't practice it as much. And all of a sudden the next week, it's like, oh, but you had this great progress last lesson. What happened? Like, well, I didn't feel like I really had it. Oh, that's not good. So yeah, make sure, post it at eye level. Ask your students before you move on from whatever activity, whatever they're playing, just ask them, you know, is there anything you need help with to feel successful? All right, I hope you have an incredible day. I hope that you enjoyed this series. Please hit the subscribe button so that it lets me know things like this are really helpful for you. And that way I will keep creating them. All right, have an incredible day. And I look forward to seeing you in the comments or in the rest of the social media for the unfinished lesson. Bye.